The Washington quarter is one of the most recognizable coins in American history, a design that has circulated in the hands of millions of people for generations, and when we talk about the mid-1960s, the story becomes even more fascinating because of a unique chapter in U.S. coinage history. The 1966 Washington quarter dollar without a mint mark, especially in fine condition, is a coin that often surprises collectors. On the surface, it might look like just another pocket change relic from a time when America was shifting through cultural revolutions, technological growth, and political changes, but when we dig deeper, we find that this coin carries layers of history, controversy, and collector intrigue that make it more than worthy of attention. This is not just a coin, it's a snapshot of a transitional moment in American numismatics, one that can carry values ranging anywhere from a modest few dollars to tens of thousands depending on unique factors like errors, rarity of certain examples, and condition. To really understand the 1966 Washington quarter dollar, we first have to step back and look at the context in which it was struck. Just 2 years before, in 1964, the United States Mint made one of the most dramatic changes in its entire history. The country had been minting silver coins since the late 18th century, with dimes, quarters, and half dollars made of 90% silver and 10% copper. But as silver prices rose in the early 1960s, people began to hoard these coins, pulling them out of circulation because their intrinsic value in silver was beginning to surpass their face value. The government feared a massive shortage of coins, which could disrupt everyday commerce. The solution, signed into law through the Coinage Act of 1965, was to eliminate silver from the dime and quarter, and reduce it significantly in the half dollar. Beginning in 1965, quarters were struck with a copper-nickel-clad composition, featuring an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The 1966 Washington quarter was only the second full year of this new clad coinage, which makes it significant in its own right. Now, here's where things get especially intriguing for collectors. During the years 1965, 1966, and 1967, the United States Mint suspended the use of mint marks on coins. This was done deliberately as part of an effort to discourage hoarding and speculation. The Treasury worried that collectors were snatching up new coins with mint marks, leaving shortages in circulation. By removing mint marks, the mint hoped to make coins less appealing for hoarders and to stabilize circulation. That's why the 1966 Washington quarter has no mint mark at all, regardless of whether it was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. So when we say 1966 Washington quarter dollar without mint mark, it's not because one particular mint was excluded, it's because none of them carried mint marks during that 3-year span. This detail adds an unusual layer of uniformity to the coinage of those years, but ironically, it also creates collector curiosity, because it makes people wonder about varieties and specific production nuances. The mintage for the 1966 Washington quarter was remarkably high, as the mint worked overtime to pump more clad coinage into circulation and ease the shortage. Over 821 million quarters were struck in that year alone, a staggering number by mid-20th century standards. With so many coins produced, you might assume the 1966 quarter is common and uninteresting, but as any numismatist knows, rarity is not the only factor that drives value. Condition, historical context, and especially rare varieties can transform an ordinary piece into something extraordinary. That's precisely why collectors are still drawn to the 1966 Washington quarter more than half a century later. Let's talk about the design itself. The obverse features the familiar portrait of George Washington, designed by sculptor John Flanagan back in 1932 when the quarter was first introduced to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. The word "Liberty" arches across the top, the motto, "In God We Trust," sits to the left of Washington's profile, and the date, 1966, rests beneath his neck. On the reverse, the bold heraldic eagle spreads its wings, perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches beneath, symbolizing both military readiness and peace. Surrounding this is the inscription, "United States of America," at the top, "E Pluribus Unum," above the eagle's head, and "quarter dollar," at the bottom. This classic design was a staple for decades, and even though millions were struck, the artistry and symbolism continue to appeal to collectors today. When we move from design to errors and varieties, the real treasure hunt begins. Error coins from the mid-1960s are especially fascinating because the mint was under enormous pressure to produce massive quantities quickly. That urgency sometimes resulted in mistakes slipping through the cracks. Among 1966 Washington quarters, collectors seek examples with double die obverse, where inscriptions or parts of Washington's profile show noticeable doubling. Some quarters display off-center strikes, where the design is shifted, leaving a blank crescent of planchet visible. Other errors include broad strikes, clipped planchets, or coins struck on the wrong planchet entirely. Imagine finding a 1966 quarter mistakenly struck on a dime planchet. That would be a rare and valuable find, with auction values soaring well into the thousands, sometimes reaching estimates of $5,000 to $10,000 or more depending on the severity and clarity of the error. Another layer of intrigue comes from proof-like or specially struck coins. Although no official proof sets were released in 1966, because proof production was temporarily halted during the transition to clad coinage, the mint did issue what were called special mint sets, or SMS coins. These were produced with greater care than regular circulation strikes, and they often feature sharper details and more reflective surfaces. The 1966 SMS quarters are highly collectible today, and those graded in superb condition by services like PCGS or NGC can command values of several $100s. In fact, some particularly stunning 1966 SMS Washington quarters have been known to sell for over $1,000 when they exhibit deep cameo contrast, where the frosted design elements sharply contrast against mirror-like fields. It's a dramatic and visually striking effect that collectors absolutely love. Market value for the standard circulation strike 1966 Washington quarter in fine condition remains modest for most examples. A typical coin with honest wear might only bring between $1 and $3, still more than face value, but nothing to cause headlines. However, the magic of numismatics lies in the outliers. Exceptional examples, especially those that fall into the error or SMS categories, can bring life-changing sums. One particularly famous 1966 quarter error, a double die obverse with strong doubling visible in the inscriptions, has fetched upwards of $10,000 at auction. Some off-center strikes or wrong planchet errors have exceeded $15,000. And in the case of a flawless SMS coin graded at the very top of the population charts, we're talking about hammer prices that soar past $20,000 to $25,000. These are the kinds of numbers that keep collectors' eyes wide open and keep the dream alive of finding a hidden treasure in an old collection or even, in rare cases, in circulation. Let's put those numbers into perspective. Imagine finding a 1966 Washington quarter dollar in your change, glancing at it, and realizing that it has a striking off-center error or an unmistakable double die feature. That one small piece of metal, originally worth only 25 cents, could now be worth as much as a new car, or even a down payment on a house. That's the allure of coin collecting. It's not just about history or design, it's about the thrill of discovery, the possibility that ordinary objects can hold extraordinary value. For the 1966 Washington quarter, those stories are very real. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers have sold examples of this coin for tens of thousands of dollars under the right circumstances. It's not speculation, it's reality, and it continues to inspire collectors worldwide. Of course, condition plays a huge role in value. While a 1966 Washington quarter in fine condition has only modest retail worth, coins in mint state, especially those graded MS-66 or higher, can bring significantly more. A lustrous, well-struck example with few marks can command hundreds, and in rare cases, even thousands. This makes grading knowledge essential for anyone interested in the coin. Understanding the difference between fine, extremely fine, and mint state is key to identifying whether your coin is an everyday collectible or a potential gem. Fine condition coins will show considerable wear, with Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers smoothed down, but the major details remain visible. These are the coins most commonly found in old jars or circulated collections. But if you stumble upon a mint state example, that's where the real excitement begins. Historically, the 1966 Washington quarter also reflects a moment when the American public was still adjusting to the absence of silver in their coins. Many people at the time felt the new clad quarters looked dull compared to the older, brighter silver versions. Collectors in the 1960s hoarded pre-1965 silver quarters by the millions, and they often overlooked the clad versions as unremarkable. Ironically, that widespread indifference is part of why the 1966 quarters, especially the unusual varieties, are so appealing today. What was once considered common and unworthy of attention has become a niche area of interest, with modern collectors scouring for high-grade survivors, SMS examples, and dramatic errors. It's a classic case of history coming full circle, where yesterday's overlooked coins become today's prizes. Another aspect worth noting is how the suspension of mint marks in 1966 created a sense of mystery for collectors. Without a letter to indicate whether a coin came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, there is no easy way to distinguish production origins. This has led to speculation and curiosity about differences in strike quality and die characteristics. Advanced collectors sometimes study die varieties and minor details to trace coins back to specific facilities, turning the hunt for 1966 quarters into a kind of detective game. It's one of those subtle but fascinating elements that makes numismatics endlessly engaging for those who dig deep. When you add all these layers together, the historical shift from silver to clad coinage, the deliberate omission of mint marks, the massive mintage, the existence of error coins, and the limited but beautiful special mint set issues, you start to see why the 1966 Washington quarter dollar without mint mark is so much more than just another coin. It becomes a piece of history that connects us to a time of economic adjustment, government policy decisions, and changing public perceptions. And when you throw in the possibility of high-value errors or top-graded specimens, the coin suddenly takes on an allure that captivates both beginners and seasoned numismatists alike. So the next time you come across a 1966 Washington quarter dollar, don't dismiss it as ordinary pocket change. Look closely. Study the details on Washington's profile, the inscriptions, the eagle's feathers. Check for signs of doubling, off-center strikes, or unusual surfaces. If you're lucky enough to have a special mint set example, examine it for cameo contrast and pristine preservation. What might appear to be a common coin can sometimes reveal itself as a rare and valuable treasure. And with auction values ranging from a few dollars for average examples to as high as $25,000 or more for rare varieties and high-grade SMS coins, the 1966 quarter proves once again that in numismatics, every coin has a story, and sometimes that story can be worth a fortune.